Bashar al-Assad, the former president of Syria, has been suffering from the collapse of his dictatorship for the past 2 weeks, and it appears that his marriage may be coming to an end. The fall from grace of this woman, who was once acclaimed as a modern-day queen of elegance and diplomacy, has left the entire globe in a state of shock. There was a time when she was a representation of power and refinement, and then there was another time when she was running away to Moscow under the cover of darkness, her life descending into turmoil. So what took place? How was it that she went from governing in lavish palaces to becoming a symbol of shattered power and political controversy? Do not go just yet, for this tale is anything but typical. In addition, if you believe that this is the end of it, you are mistaken. According to the reports, his wife has asked for a divorce. It is Asma al-Assad who is her name. Evidently, she is not content with the new life she has chosen. Disappear from grace. The fall of the Assad regime was like a seismic shift that shook not only the Middle East but the whole region as a whole. With a frenzied campaign that turned decades of iron-fisted government on its head, the rebels were able to pull off something that could have been written straight out of a Hollywood script. As if witnessing a house of cards collapse, only that this one had been standing for 53 years. It was a breathtaking experience. In light of the fact that the timeline was nothing short of startling, let's talk about it for a moment. On November 30th, 2024, opposition forces launched an assault on Aleppo, sparking the beginning of the entire situation. The largest city in Syria collapsed as if it had been anticipating this moment for a long time. From that point on, it was kind of like a domino effect. It wasn't only about taking the city when Hama fell on December 5th, it was about more than that. In scenes that were equal parts wild and cathartic, they broke inside the notorious jails that Assad had built and freed captives free. Then, on December 7th, Daraa and Homs were destroyed, two important strongholds that had been destroyed in what seemed like hours. After that, on December 8th, Damascus, which was the center of Assad's Syria, was destroyed. The Assad family's dominance over Syria, which had lasted for more than half a century, came to an abrupt end. One of the most horrific things that has ever happened to Syria's former First Lady has just occurred, and it is sending shockwaves all around the world. One would wonder what could possibly be so concerning that it has everyone talking about it. Did she find herself caught in the middle of a political maelstrom, or is there something far more sinister at play? This is a story that is full of unexpected turns, twists, and revelations that are hard to believe. Be sure to stay to the very end, because the truth will leave you completely unable to express yourself. However, let's not overlook the fact that the Assads were able to make their spectacular escape because, to tell you the truth, it's almost like a movie. The rebels were getting closer and closer to Damascus, and the cadence of the clock was increasing with each passing second. It was necessary for Bashar al-Assad and his closest allies to make their escape while it was still dark. A man who had previously had ultimate power over Syria was making his way out of the country covertly through Damascus International Airport, with the intention of going directly to Khmeimim Air Base, which is a Russian stronghold located close to Latakia. Maher al-Assad, who is his brother Izzy. It was a daring escape by helicopter that he was able to pull off, and he made his way to Iraq before eventually seeking shelter in Russia. What a dramatic way to leave, don't you think? However, what were they contemplating at that precise moment? Is it fear, regret, or nothing more than a cold, determined attempt to survive? Move forward in time to Moscow, where the Assads arrived, most likely still hurting from the fall from grace that they experienced. The confirmation that they had been granted asylum was provided by Mikhail Ulyanov, the Russian ambassador. But this is when things start to become unclear. Despite the fact that the Kremlin has publicly denied any severe limitations or asset freezes, one cannot help but wonder whether or not their new life in exile was indeed as comfortable as it appeared to be. After returning to Damascus, the atmosphere was eerie and unreal. This was the first time in decades that regular residents were seen strolling through the presidential palace in the same manner as tourists would in a museum. People were taking selfies under chandeliers that had previously glistened above the most confidential gatherings that Assad had attended. The palace, which had been a representation of power and dread, was now little more than a shell. Isn't that the perfect way to summarize everything? Let us not forget the toll that this regime exacted on Syria, which was a brutal civil war that lasted for 13 years and resulted in the deaths of somewhere between 470,000 and 600,000 people. On paper, those are nothing more than numbers. There was a life, a family, and a story hidden behind each and every digit. To maintain their hold on power, the Assad family endured unfathomable pain. Moreover, when everything came crashing down, it felt like it was both inevitable and startling at the same time simultaneously. Legal entanglements. Doesn't it appear that the legal noose is tightening more than it ever has before around the family that was the erstwhile first family of Syria? It's almost like watching a stressful game of chess unfold, with each move being planned to put the opponent in a more difficult position. The United States of America and the European Union, who have always taken a cautious approach, have now thrown down the gauntlet with what might very well be their most stringent sanctions to yet. Are you familiar with the sensation that you get when someone suddenly stops being pleasant and starts doing everything they can? Indeed, that is precisely what is taking place here. This represents a significant change in the way that international relations are managed. Believe me when I say that it is just as serious as it sounds. Therefore, let's discuss these sanctions, shall we? According to the United States government, the Caesar Act, which seems more like a plot twist in an espionage thriller, has become the most powerful weapon in their arsenal. It has enabled them to impose limitations on a population that have never been seen before, resulting in the removal of 39 individuals and businesses that are connected to the Syrian regime. Now, however, here is an intriguing aspect. It's not just politicians that are being targeted by these sanctions. One of their targets is the inner circle, which includes the immediate family. When we talk about assets, would it be possible for us to discuss the scope of this freeze? At this point, there are 270 kilograms of gold that have been frozen, $2 billion in cash that have been tied up, and 18 homes in Moscow that have been placed under close control, similar to a lockdown in terms of finances. Even the United Kingdom has joined the party now that the authorities in that country are taking a firm stance. Did you know that they took 24,768.24 pounds out of the account of a single member of the family? That is not a trivial alteration. Also, what about the National Crime Agency? There is no doubt about it now. It is irrelevant to consider size when it comes to the enforcement of these sanctions, no matter how big or how small people are taking action. However, that is not the end of it. There are restrictions on travel, which adds another layer to this already extremely intricate puzzle. The European Union (EU) has implemented a comprehensive travel ban, which is a significant development. But that's not all. Here's the catch. The former First Lady's citizenship in the United Kingdom makes this proposal more difficult to implement. You can practically say that there is a legal gray area, which makes you wonder how they will deal with this situation. The limits are unbreakable and have an impact on the movement of people within EU countries, the transactions of property, and even the activities of businesses. Putting yourself in a glass box where everyone can see you but you are unable to move around is a similar experience. The recent events that have transpired with Syria's former First Lady are tough to believe. There is nothing more horrifying than the specifics. Is it possible that this is the outcome of political conflicts that have not been resolved? Another possibility is that she has become the target of something even more nefarious. You will be completely taken aback by the conclusion of this narrative, which is both engrossing and disturbing in equal measure. You won't want to miss a single second of this story, so ensure that you stay for the whole of it. There are limits imposed by Russia. For the Assad family, life in Moscow has turned out to be a complex labyrinth of unexpected difficulties throughout their time there. It is as if they have entered an entirely new universe, one that is replete with bureaucratic hurdles, stringent procedures, and the constant watchful eye of the Russian system for prominent individuals seeking shelter with the Russian government. What would it be like to go from the lively, sun-soaked streets of Damascus, where you had all the freedom and influence you could ever want, to the tight constraints of Moscow's refugee policies? Can you even fathom the possibility? To say the least, that amounts to a significant contrast. To begin, let's discuss the limitations placed on the freedom of movement. Despite the fact that the Kremlin may maintain, in an official capacity, that there are no restrictions on the locations to which asylum seekers can travel, reports from Turkish media present a completely different picture. When it comes to the Assad family, it is comparable to being confined within an invisible cage. They are unable to leave Moscow. In fact, they are not permitted to take part in any political activities at all. What do you think about that? An extended family that formerly wielded a great deal of political influence is now confined to a single city and unable to travel around freely. Wouldn't you say that it's nearly ironic? Then there is the problem of financial resources. The fact that they are extraordinarily affluent is a different type of hardship for them, despite the fact that you would think that it would make life simpler for them. At this point, it appears as though their riches has turned into a trap rather than a ticket to freedom. Their portfolio includes opulent locations such as apartments in the City of Capitals complex and the Federation Tower, among other prestigious properties. Nevertheless, what is the point if they are unable to touch any of it? According to estimates provided by the United States Department of State, the extended Assad family's net worth is somewhere in the range of $1 billion to $2 billion United States dollars. On the other hand, here they are, being required to account for each ruble. The routine activities of the family have become a nightmare due to the bureaucratic process. Every person who is seeking refuge, regardless of how prominent they are, is required to register with the local migration authorities. Within the next week, they are required to report any changes that have occurred in their personal status and undergo mandatory medical examinations. Doesn't it sound frustrating? It is difficult to understand how much more difficult it is when you are constantly being watched because you are a prominent figure. According to reports, the Moscow police conduct frequent identity checks, and landlords are burdened with additional tasks, such as accompanying renters for registration and managing an unending amount of paperwork. How, in all honesty, do they manage to get through a day without having the sensation that they are being scrutinized by a magnifying glass? On the other hand, these are not all bad news. They are eligible for certain benefits, including as living in official housing provided by the Russian government. There is, of course, a catch to this. The authorities keep a careful eye on their whereabouts and movements. Living in such a golden cage is almost like being confined. It's true that you have the conveniences of affluence, but do you have the liberty to take full advantage of them? A little less so. However, it is important to note that this is just one example of a larger pattern in Russia's approach to dealing with Syrian migrants. You may not be aware of this, but between the years 2011 and 2016, Russia awarded complete refugee status to only 2 Syrians. There were around 1,300 additional people who were successful in obtaining temporary refuge. However, when compared to the number of people who have fled the crisis in Syria, this is something of a drop in the ocean. The fact that the Kremlin, through its spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, continues to refute rumors of severe limitations is a curious phenomenon. As far as they are concerned, the family is not dealing with anything that is out of the ordinary. But observers from other countries have a different perspective. Inherently restricted is the refugee system that Russia has in place. There are restrictions placed on freedoms, such as quotas, housing possibilities that are restricted, and travel within the country that is closely regulated. Therefore, even if the limits aren't considered to be particularly severe, they are nevertheless extremely restrictive. What is the solution to the problem? In comparison to the power and privilege they formerly enjoyed in Damascus, the Assad family's existence in Moscow is a long cry from what they once had. A life that is characterized by restrictions, constraints, and continual supervision is what it is. It is a tale of adjusting to new circumstances and remaining resilient in the face of a system that is intended to confine individuals to certain strict parameters. And if you're being completely honest, doesn't it make you wonder how they manage to deal with the irony of being wealthy and prominent while being subject to such strict control? Is there any news regarding Syria's former First Lady? Doesn't the fact that Asma al-Assad holds British citizenship seem to be one of those things that generates an unending amount of debate? Despite the fact that she was born and raised in London, and that her parents continue to reside in the quaint suburbs of West London, this woman is currently residing in Moscow, where she finds herself caught in the midst of a tremendous legal and diplomatic storm. Due to the fact that she continues to possess British citizenship, the authorities in the United Kingdom are currently dealing with one of the most convoluted cases they have ever encountered. To what extent do you even begin to deal with anything of this nature? Having such strong ties to Britain is not something that happens every day, especially for someone who is so closely connected to one of the most controversial governments in the world. First things first, let's talk about her current legal situation, because, it's a complicated web. She maintains her status as a British citizen on paper. This has not been altered. When compared to the average life of someone with that rank, however, her reality is very different. What would it be like to be a citizen of a country but not be able to take advantage of any of the privileges that come along with that status? It seems perplexing, doesn't it? To be honest, that is precisely her predicament. As part of European sanctions against the government of her husband, the United Kingdom placed a freeze on her assets in March of 2012. These restrictions remained in place even after the United Kingdom left the European Union. Therefore, although she is still considered a citizen in a legal sense, this status is more of a title than anything else. There is no way for her to schedule a flight back to the United Kingdom. She can't just drop out of the United Kingdom and go back to living her old life. What about the government of the United Kingdom? Oh my goodness, they have been completely transparent about their position. David Lammy, the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, has made it abundantly clear that Asma al-Assad is not desired during his tenure. In the course of a parliamentary session, he made it quite clear that she is a sanctioned individual and that she is not permitted to be present in the United Kingdom. That's quite straightforward, isn't it? This statement was made at a time when there were speculations going about that she would be attempting to go back to Britain. Are you able to fathom the kind of commotion that might result from that? The Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, adopted a more cautious approach, stating that it is far too early to talk withdrawing her citizenship. This is in contrast to the previous statement. As the government attempts to strike a balance between political realities and legal precedent, his position appears to be reflective of the tightrope dance that the government is conducting. But let me tell you something. It's not just about the government in this situation. Public opinion is also a significant factor in this regard. There are a lot of individuals who have quite strong feelings about this, and to tell you the truth, who could blame them? When it came to the thought of her returning, Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick did not hold back when he referred to it as an insult to the millions of people who have been victimized by Assad. However, it does convey the genuine feelings that people feel when they hear her name, which is a statement that cannot be taken lightly. Not only that, but experts from think tanks such as Chatham House have been weighing in on the matter, drawing parallels between her predicament and instances in which members of the Islamic State group had their citizenship taken away. If the United Kingdom is able to revoke citizenship for them, then why can't it do the same for Asma? It is a question that is hard to ignore, isn't it? The legal aspect is another consideration. Citizenship in the United Kingdom is not a privilege that is unalienable and unchangeable. Not only is it a privilege, but it also comes with certain duties.